Rob Betty here. Welcome back to your Bermex and Bertanie training modules. We're talking about customization and all the many options available in the world of dining rooms by Bermex and Bertanie. One of the biggest and most important choices your customer will make is that of finish color. And we have a wide range of options to offer them in terms of both color and distressing level. There are over 300 different finish combinations available. If you look at our website, you'll see them listed there. I want to take a few minutes here to get into the details of what some of the key differences are. 300 sounds like an overwhelming number of choices, but when you boil it down, it's not really that intimidating. What you will find, though, is we have a solution for the vast majority of consumers, regardless of their preference of color and distressing. I'll start by pointing out that we have two main categories of finish. Those that have toner in them and those that don't. And you might say, what is a toner? Well, when a fresh piece of furniture, let's say a tabletop, comes to our finishing department, the very first step of the finish process is the application, in many cases, of what's called a toner coat. If you look at any natural wood product, you'll find that it's made up of different boards. If we look closely at this table, for example, you can see some of the grain lines differing from board to board. Each of those boards is going to absorb stain slightly differently. So you'll have a natural variation within any natural wood product. What a toner does, in the same way that foundation does with women's makeup, or maybe a primer coat on a wall if you're painting, is it takes those natural variations between the boards and it evens off the peaks and the valleys so that you get more subtle gradations in color showing up. We, of course, want the natural beauty of wood to show through. You'll never get a completely flat monochromatic color with a stained finish applied to solid birch, but we don't necessarily want a zebra stripe jumping out in the middle of our table. So the use of toner gives us a great added value feature to the customer who wants solid wood but wants consistency in their finish. All of the stains that we see offered here on our Bermex and Bertanie tower display would fall into the category of finishes that have that first toner step in the application to even out the wood. Within these categories of finishes, there's actually 25 different stain colors, and each of those stain colors comes in a variety of different distress treatments. I'm going to go into a little bit of detail as to what those options are. So the first category is described as wipe stain. In this case, we're looking at a color called caramel, so the finish itself is called wipe stain caramel. This finish, it has a toner applied at the beginning, then they apply the caramel color and they hand wipe it to give a nice even coloration, and then it's sealed and sanded again, and then the varnish is applied. So it's a long-term multi-step finish that provides a very high quality finished product. In the case of a wipe stain finish, there's no physical distressing at all. It's a pristine, finely sanded product. The next step, though, would be something we call heirloom. If you look very closely at the heirloom finish, you'll see that we've rounded the corners and softened them ever so slightly. And it's a little bit hard to see probably here on camera, but there's light distressing marks throughout the surface of this particular product. So this is called heirloom caramel. The color is exactly the same as the previous, but we're starting with a slightly distressed product. If you were looking to draw an analogy, you might call this 20-year aging. The next step after heirloom is a finish we call rustic. In this case, we're looking at rustic caramel. In addition to the softened corners and the light distressing, you'll see some more pronounced distressing with heavy rasp marks that have been applied both to the center and the edge surfaces of the table. And you'll also notice some darkening around the perimeter. This is to create the illusion of a pre-aged product. So we would call this a 40-year aging. The next step beyond rustic is a process or a finish we call old. In this case, again, the color remains the same, but this is called old caramel. And here we've gone considerably further in terms of applying tool and chisel marks throughout the surface to give it a heavily worn, surface throughout the entire tabletop. So we would call this 60-year aging. And then the final step in that progression is a finish we would call ancestral. And in the case of ancestral, we've gone to great lengths to age the product. And ancestral would be 100-year aging, but still with the caramel finish and the toner applied to give you an even coloration, but the ancestral being a 100-year-old look to the product. And you can see here heavy tool marks, heavy discolorations, and worn edges and surfaces around the perimeter. Each of those options, from wipe stain to heirloom to rustic to old to ancestral, gives you a progressively more heavily distressed finish for the customer who might prefer that, both in terms of a fashion look but also in terms of a lifestyle option, because obviously a distressed table is going to be more forgiving when it comes to scratches and bumps from everyday use. But as we go to a more heavily distressed look, it becomes a more traditional and antiqued feel. Not every consumer who wants family friendly wants to have an antiqued or traditional looking style. What's the solution for them in terms of family friendliness? Well, that's where we have our wipe stain brush finish. And if you look closely here, this is a carefully machine applied horizontal brushing that runs counter to the grain, and you can see it gives almost a textured look to the wood. And what that does is give it a little bit of a rustic but contemporary flavor, and at the same time gives it a little more forgiving wear and tear approach when it comes to hiding everyday scratches that might occur from everyday use. So the wipe stain brush option comes on any of the 25 colors that are offered in our wipe stain category, and that's also true of the heirloom, the ancestral, the rustic, and the old. All of those come in a range of 25 finishes. All of what we've described there so far are what we call our toner finishes. They give you a relatively monochromatic, subtle gradations in the appearance of the wood grain. But we have a whole other category of finishes which are much more highlighted, and I want to draw those to your attention now.